Welcome back to another episode of Light Beer, Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble.
And I'm Chris Clements.
And we have a repeat guest today.
So Jeff Utsch was number 2, 3, 4
Very
back in
early
the
on.
day, back at GCU,
Back in the
hollowed halls.
when we sounded more like NPR.
When yes, we were talking about our sweaty, It was an SNL skit.
Yes.
Yeah, but
Guys are great. It's great to be back,
Jeff,
Yeah,
it's so
it's been
good to
a
have you. What do you think of our new digs?
I love it.
Well, it's not new anymore.
No,
That's the
we've
thing.
been here
That's
a
the
while.
first I've seen it with you guys here, so that's awesome.
We've been here quite some time, but thank you so much for being
You bet.
on.
You bet.
You are a busy man. You what a lot of people do know about you is that you love the Constitution,
I do. American history.
yeah. But also you have like a side job whereby you go out to Coronado and places back east and swim with
Mostly
some of
East
our-
Coast now. but
mostly
yeah.
East Coast,
Yeah.
but swim with guys called Navy SEALs, the best
Swim
of
with
the
the SEALs.
best. Swim with the SEALs.
That's right. Yeah, no, it's been an honor to do that. 30 year. I just had my 30th year reunion swim in October.
So
So
tell
that
our
ages
listeners
me a little bit.
So 30 years ago, you're a young buck.
Well,
You're not military.
No.
How did that happen? Like, how did you become? I mean, you're the guy who takes them out on these swims and teaches them with the
Right.
with all their gear how to survive.
Well, I was teaching swimming clinics around the country first, just triathlon clinics, how to swim. And I had a couple SEALs in those classes. And I said, hey, is what I'm teaching, would that help you at all? And they happened to be BUDS instructors. They said yes. They did not immediately invite me back, but I started thinking, this is before cell phone era. Driving home from San Diego to Tucson, my wife said, well, why don't you see if the SEALs have an 800 number? And I said, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Like, the SEAL teams are going to have an 800 number. When we got home, I called 1-800-555-1212, which is information.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, look,
Is that still
I'm
around?
embarrassed. My wife thinks a SEAL team might have an 800 number. But sure enough, SEAL Team 4 had an 800 number back in those days. And she said, call them. And like, what am I going to say? She said, well, tell them what you do. So I called them, and it happened to be, I think the one guy, Master of Arms, Kirk Herrick, answered the phone. SEAL Team 4, quarterdeck, how may I help you, ma'am or sir? Can't do that anymore, by the way, but back in those days you could. And I told him what I did, and I'm from Virginia, so he said, next time you come back to, see your dad, we'll give you a shot.
That's
and so I went
unbelievable.
back, and that started the long journey. So pro bono for a number of years, and then started creating programs.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. That's
And
Many
that
years.
is
So it's a great honor. Look, I'm not military. I'm not a SEAL, and they do a lot of things very well. I
Yeah.
do one thing, that's
but
my
you do the
swimming
one thing
background.
that I think people who are vying to be part of the elite, which is the Navy SEALs, are the most frightened about. And that's
well,
the
getting
swimming.
in the open water, certainly. Yeah, the pool stuff's hard
The
enough.
pool
but
stuff's
when
hard
you get in
enough
the
when you're
ocean,
all
it
about
does
to drown in the pool.
separate, yeah.
During BUDS, but what crushes a lot of guys and
Right.
makes guys ring that bell is the swimming.
The cold,
cold
getting in and out, and the swimming. Yeah, you want to be good enough in the water that the swimming is actually your respite. That's
Yeah.
your rest place. That's where you want to be. So if it's not your rest place, because you're out there on
You're
some
out there
long
stressed.
swims, and that's the time maybe nobody's yelling at you. And if you're a good enough swimmer, maybe you can just kind of hang in there. And so it's a great skill to have, but it's not just to get through BUDS or to become a SEAL. I mean, they were in the sandbox for many years, but they're back in the water now. So it's
Yeah.
a skill that you actually really need to have, and they do take seriously.
Now, what has been your most, I guess, frightening swim?
Well, my most
Have you had one?
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure you have.
Well, my most frightening swim was a World Championships around Atlantic City, Absecon Island, 26-mile swim.
Oof.
And that was back in 1996, and I was in the race, close to the lead, and about 2 hours in the race, I turned over because you can't touch the boat. The seas are getting really rough, and I had a little stick. You can't touch the boat, so they have a stick, and they put a cup on the end of it. and you try to drink it quick. So I go to my back, and a wave comes over, fills the cup with salt water. I drink it.
Oh.
And if you've ever been in a 26-mile swim in about mile 7, drank about 8 ounces of salt water. About 15 minutes later, started throwing up. And there's no wetsuits, very cold. It was 57 to 62 degrees. So started getting hypothermic, then cramping, and then, just really throwing up. And that one almost killed me. So that was a 10.
Yeah.
They had to carry me out. Blood pressure 50/30, my body core temperature 86, supposed to be dead at 86.
Oh my.
So it was tough. That was a 3-month recovery, and so I gauge all other physical activity to that because I couldn't. I mean, I knew I was close.
Yeah.
I could feel the body shutting down,
Oh.
and I could get into but we don't have a lot of time for that. But when you are working with the SEALs, the big dogs bite. And so, a couple years after that, some guys from SEAL Team 4, we were out doing night insertion extraction work. And these guys were supposed to bring my wetsuit. So never trust anybody else to bring your wetsuit. And this is in December in the Atlantic, right?
Oh my.
So I come there with my Speedos, and they're like, and I was, okay, this guy, John, was supposed to bring my wetsuit. He didn't show up. And I said, so I was, Rich, did John give you my wetsuit? No, he did. And then I figured I could ride out with the boats, and it's not going to be any big deal. We go out and then sit in the boats and then just swim in, so maybe 1,000 yards, something like that. It wouldn't be that bad. And they're like, well, did you sign the waiver? And I was like, you can't, what waiver? You're not in the military. You can't ride in the boats unless you sign a waiver. And so I was like, come on, guys. Okay, so here I am. It's midnight. It's in December. I got my Speedos on. I got a goggle. So they gave me this nightstick and broke it, so the light, and then put it in underneath my goggles so the boats wouldn't kill me as I was swimming out and they were doing all their stuff.
Wow.
So I tread water for about 2 hours, about 1,000 yards off, because it was a test time.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I'm thinking, I've never been in the middle of the Atlantic at 1:30 in the morning with a light stick on. I wonder if this is going to attract, anything from underneath. But I didn't have to worry about underneath. It was above. There was something that dive bombed me twice. And
No
those
kidding.
two, oh yeah. I have no idea what it is to this day. It was so pitch dark. But then about 30 minutes after that, I heard some yells. Boats were swimming in over here. So I swam in with the swimmer scouts, and I had to swim back to the main boat and swim in again. But the good thing is I kept shaking. And because I've had my body core temperature so low, I know I'm not in trouble until I stop shaking. So
That's interesting.
I was out there, and I was like, this is not fun, but I've had worse.
Yeah.
I've had a lot. Actually, I've had a lot worse. And so
much of that is just mental,
yeah,
right?
just relaxing, just kind of disconnecting.
How do you prepare mentally for that? I mean, before you even enter the water.
You just kind of say, this is going to suck, but I'm going to look forward to the hot tub afterwards. I mean, if it does, and you do disconnect your, there is a mentality you put on, kind of like, okay, I'm going to disconnect the outer parts and what I'm feeling to what I've got to do. There's a huge mental aspect to it.
Yeah.
But I've been hypothermic enough times that there'll be times I'm walking on the beach and it's getting late and dark and the wind blows.
Yeah.
And I hate to admit this, but it's true, but I'll just start shaking. And it's not a physical, because I'm not cold yet, but it there's something that triggers.
You're
something. It's kind of like heat stroke. If you've had
Right.
heat stroke, you're kind of, and I do the same thing. I mean, just uncontrollable until I kind of like calm
Settle
down
in.
a little bit and say, okay, you're not freezing, this kind of thing.
Chris, one thing you could do what I do, which is do a cold plunge each morning.
Yeah,
You can just
well,
do that
there
in the
you
pool
go.
right now.
There you go.
Well, yeah, but
Now, the good thing about cold plunges, though, you're not in for 4 hours.
Right.
You've got
Yeah.
a time limit there where
it's
that's
3 or
gonna-
5 minutes.
That's right. There you go.
That's
You know when it'll
wild.
end.
Well, congratulations on your 30-year
Yeah,
anniversary.
it's a blessing. I work with some of the greatest people on earth that are motivated, believe in the mission,
Yeah.
and put that really most of the time above all else. And so we can, I'm not going to say as an American people we can rest easy, but there are people that are willing to be out there doing things that we would rather not.
Yeah.
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 Well, and one of the things, Jeff, that I appreciate about you is you have an immense knowledge of our history as an American, the founding fathers. I have, and I've mentioned this on the podcast recently, I'm in the midst of a series of books that I'm reading, mostly by Richard Brookhiser.
Yeah.
Just finished Madison, now reading his book on Hamilton, read one
Right.
about the great documents. Tell us a little bit about what you see in today's world that is a disconnect from what the founders had envisioned for us.
Right. Well, thanks for asking. You know, one of the reasons I really like to teach American history, the Constitution, our founding, is David McCullough, one of our greatest American historians, said our greatest national treasure is our shared history. And so, and I believe that because it's what makes us a team. And if that's our greatest national treasure, but we don't harvest it or we don't mine it, then what good is it going to do us?
Right.
And then early on in teaching with the SEAL teams, I recognized, look, I'm not the guy out there at the pointy end of the spear. And I was with our highest level SEAL team when 9/11 happened. And I did see everybody else except for me go down range. And there was there was guilt. And it was like, man, I haven't put myself where I need to be when I needed to be there to make a difference. But I realized soon after, if they're risking their lives to protect our way of life and defend the Constitution from abroad, then if we lose it here at home, what good does it do us?
Right.
You know? And so at that point, I kind of just decided I'm going to do everything I can to defend and protect what we have at home. And so that's what I do. So I do think it's really important. It's what makes us a team. And what I mean by that is, you know, just think about what makes great teams. You know, so look at the Pittsburgh Steelers or any, you know, and I get flack for that. No, I'm not a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. But look, they have loyal fans.
Yeah.
The Boston Red Sox, you know, and there's a reason for that, you know.
The Los Angeles Dodgers.
Yeah, okay, there you go. All right. So what makes a great team? And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is teach the Constitution to change perspectives. And this is kind of what I am really what I call the Clarence. Okay, so if you've watched The Wonderful Life, right, and you have George Bailey, who is ready to jump off a bridge because he thinks his life is worthless and he hasn't done any good. And, of course, Clarence is there to save him. And then the next 2 hours is spent changing George Bailey's perspective, not his reality, his perspective on what his life was like. And then all of a sudden he thinks, I'm the luckiest guy in the world, right?
Right.
And so that's what needs to happen with America, because George Bailey was being, in his own mind, he was teaching himself false narratives of what a loser he was, what he had no impact, and that life would have been better without him. And really, we've been taught that recently about America, the 1619 Project, which is mostly false narratives. It's some truth sprinkled with false narratives, because that is not when our country was founded. That is not when our ideals were created. I mean, you know, so part of what I teach is John Adams said it wasn't the first shots at Lexington and Concord that started the Revolutionary War. The Revolutionary War was what really began in the hearts and minds of the people 15 years preceding that first shot. And when you think about it, you know, in 1760, we believed in being subject to a king and having our commerce regulated, how far we could expand west, who we would do trade with, you know, all these regulations, appointed clergy, you know, who's going to be our governor,
right?
All these restrictions. 15 years later, we rejected that.
Yeah.
And so what happened during those 15 years? The hearts and the minds of the people. So we went from the colonial to the American mindset. And the capstone of that experience was Patrick Henry's speech at St. John's Church in Richmond, Virginia in March of 1775. So you remember, Lexington and Concord happened in April of 1775.
Yes.
So just a month later. And what they were doing in Virginia, the leaders got together for the third time to decide, are we going to support our colonial friends up there in Boston? And everybody in that meeting, and literally almost unanimously, were deciding we can't because we don't have the army, we don't have the money, we don't have the powder, we don't have the guns. It's not practical to do this. We want to, and Patrick Henry listened to all this. And he got up and gave what is one of the most greatest speeches, not just in American history, but world history. And it's only 2 pages.
Right.
And what he did was he didn't do this with offending. He didn't he did slam his fist, but he didn't do it in a way that offended. He took everybody else's arguments and he started chopping them off one at a time. And then he used all the tools of statehood. Hope is not a strategy. You may hope we're not at war, but guess what? We are. You may wish this, that, this, that, and the other, but in the end, is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Now look, that speech without Patrick Henry, and this goes to anybody who's listening to think you can't make a difference. If he was not there, Virginia would not have helped Massachusetts. And if Virginia would not have helped Massachusetts, they wouldn't have had Washington or the support of the largest colony with the men and eventually arms. Right. And things would have turned out differently.
Yeah.
But he was prepared. And you never know. I mean, there's so many lessons. That's why McCullough said it's our greatest national treasure, because we can learn from this. But what happened is the American mindset was born right then, because we decided that we're going to put off safety, security, comfort, convenience, and lifestyle. And the thing that's most important is liberty. And he said, liberty or death.
Yeah.
So the American mindset. And so one of the things I want to teach is, look, let's gain the American mindset back. We had a big test over COVID. Are we colonials again?
Right.
No, think about that.
Some people were.
Well, most of us were. I hate to say it, but on both sides of the aisle. I mean, think about this, gentlemen. Look, we fought a revolutionary war in some part over no taxation without representation. But that doesn't mean just taxation. It means I don't want to be mandated from an executive power over me to coerce me on anything that I do unless we've had the ability to pass a law through the legislature,
right,
through representation. And what did every governor to start with,
right,
every governor, okay, and what did the legislatures do? The legislatures folded,
yes,
okay, and the governors took advantage. There were a couple exceptions eventually, but on both sides of the aisle, they were not strong, as Patrick Henry for sure, to get up and say, what an opportunity lost.
Well, and they abdicated their power, their innate power of federalism.
That's right.
Well, not only
but you're right.
Not only the legislature, which bowed down to the governors and did nothing, gave them almost absolute power.
Right.
But the governors then bowed down to the executive.
Right. Yes.
That's
right.
We saw that I'll say it. We saw that in this state.
Oh, we saw it in
we
the
absolutely
state.
saw
It was
it.
in every state initially, because when Trump announced basically the closure of everything. I mean, it was like in every state, it was stay inside, stay home,
right?
Don't do anything,
right?
Just to shut down the entire society,
right?
Some states came back more quickly than others. South Dakota came back quickly. I think Florida came back fairly quickly. Arizona was somewhere shortly.
Arizona
behind
had
that.
fits and starts,
Yeah.
but
But the point is, in Arizona, though, it was the governor took over,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and the legislature, in my opinion, did not kick back enough. I mean, what
the governor
state-
took over, but was taking direction from National Institutes of Health
Well,
and the
exactly,
CDC.
because it's easy to just say, well, that's what they said.
That's what they
So
said.
what?
Exactly.
But-
And rather than looking at what the data was saying, which was what I would argue what DeSantis began to do.
Right.
And look at even what the Great Barrington Declaration said,
Yes.
which we are debating in the House, in the Senate today.
But what a missed opportunity. I was discussing this with a group, ambition. Like, we all have ambition and want to do things, okay? But when does ambition go awry? Okay, and then I think it's a good discussion because, look, if you have so much ambition, let's say like a Putin, okay, or you can have some problems, or a Hitler, or these kind of things. But you need some ambition to thrive, right?
Yeah.
But the one thing and this is kind of cool because in discussing this with a class, we came up with this. Your ambition is out of line when you get to where you want to go and you are not prepared to be there.
Mm.
And that is exactly where the governors of the United States, with few exceptions, all were. Because we had a great and these opportunities don't come often. If any one of them would have been schooled in the Constitution and federalism and the founding of America and Patrick Henry's speech and what we are all about, then they would have said, look, these emergency powers are supposed to be short term. So I'm going to take a few weeks to get this act together. But then I'm going to call an emergency session of the legislature. I'm not going to force them to call it and make them do it, as in the state, our law, like, okay, you can force the governor to do this. No, the governor should have called an emergency meeting of the legislature because we, the people, want to have a say-so.
Right.
So you can abuse those. Emergency powers were never meant to be that way.
Yeah.
And then you crush the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution because there's takings, okay, with no giving back. And it's very difficult to be fair on how you do that. So we had a great opportunity for a true leader to step forward. But what was lacking was education and courage.
Right.
And I hate to say it, guys, but the reason we're not learning from this is we're not talking about it.
Well, that's a great point because and then you're exactly right. It's the education. It's people not realizing, not recognizing the whole concept of federalism, what the Constitution actually says. If it's not, enumerated in the Constitution as a federal, issue, then it's
reserved to the
states. And emergency powers should be very temporary, and ultimately, it's kind of fascinating how, and I think we fixed this. Maybe we did. Did we do it? Did we pass the initiative the referendum that limited the emergency declaration to 30 days? Can't remember whether that passed.
I don't know if the governor signed it.
Well,
This
was a ballot.
This was a ballot initiative.
Because
the
I
last
can't
one.
remember.
yeah, because
I think it did pass.
because that emergency
what's
declaration
needed.
went
Yeah.
months and months and months, and this is crazy. We need to stop.
Yeah.
Well, and we knew, and this is what really got me. We knew this was not killing the kids
Right.
within a few months. And we say we do anything for our children, and yet we did nothing as a group.
Well,
and I know this. I mean,
and all the truths that are coming out now is what is so infuriating. What we knew, even what we knew then, like the social distancing was just totally made up. Masks don't work.
right,
And yet,
right.
And yet people will saw one this morning.
Well, but this goes down
running outside with a mask on. I'm like,
Well,
good Lord.
People are more interested in being right than being correct because they don't want to admit they're wrong, right? But so
if you get vaccinated,
Yeah.
you're cured.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't work that way.
So are we colonials again? I mean, this is something we need to think about because the tests are coming that require an American mindset. I mean, one of the things, the Europeans came over to observe our Civil War. So I teach at the Leadership and Freedom Center in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and we do week-long, leadership and development classes there for law enforcement, military, and agencies. And it's just a fertile ground for learning.
Yes.
Okay. But yes, we learn from both sides because both sides were there.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Right.
I get some flack for that when I come in.
Right.
You mean we're actually going to learn from the Confederates too? Yes, we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the Confederate generals there was John Gordon. Okay. He was kind of like the Dick Winters of the Confederacy. You ever see the Band of Brothers
Yeah,
show?
yeah.
Like he was always in front, got lucky 100 times, was wounded a ton also. But the European observers came over and asked him after the war, like, why was there such high casualties? You know, just in the Battle of Gettysburg, we have in one battle between the 26th North Carolina and the 24th Michigan on the first day of the battle, July 1st, over 80% casualties on both sides, okay? 80%, 14 standard bearers shot down with the 26th North Carolina, 14, and about the same for the Michigan, okay? And these guys are like, how? And he goes, look, we're Americans, man. We know how to fight, and we are going to fight for what we believe in, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, this is what makes us Americans, and where is that? You know, but holding on to true principles. We need to make sure we're on the right side, right?
Yeah.
And do this. So, but it's part of our American heritage to be like that. And it's one of the things that makes great teams. You know, the other reason is, look, I'll be in front of crowds, and this is an example. And it's just so important because once you learn the truth about America's founding, you know, I hear a lot of people like Obama back in the day said, look, we're special just like Italy's special or
Right,
France.
right.
You remember that?
Yes.
You know, and it's like you miss it.
Yeah.
You miss
Huge.
this. And then Biden says you can't define an American. Yes, you can. And I'm hoping to do that before we leave today. But these are the kind of things you kick back on and say, so I'll get in front of a group. I've had as many as 300 people, and I'll ask them, do you believe that when Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, that he really believed that? Okay? And the most I've had in a group of 300 is 6.
Wow.
Really?
Said that they really believed he meant that. Okay, and so when you ask most people, and I'm even talking professors who teach this, okay, at the collegiate level, so we don't know it and we're not taught it. But let me tell your crowd here, because this is what I'm writing my book on.
Yeah.
100% unequivocal that he believed this. He believed all. Now, he was not living up to it yet, but we know he believed it because he said so. He said that he fears for his nation because he knows God is just and that his justice cannot forever sleep. He said we've got to find a way to, get rid of slavery. He was the original author of the Northwest Ordinance, okay, of 1787. He first draft 1785, where he wanted no slaves in the Northwest Territory. He was looking for different ways to do this. So
Yeah.
as far as did he believe everybody was equal in God's eyes and with our unalienable rights? Yes. Did he? Now you can go look. Did he believe that all races were equal in intelligence? No, he wasn't there yet.
Right.
And he started to become there, but he did believe this.
Yeah.
And guess what? So did 95% of the other founders. And I know this because I read them. Okay, I've
Right.
looked up every single signer of the
It
Declaration
was one of the great
Independence.
struggles of our founding.
Yes. So look, at the time of the founding, all 13 colonies had slaves. Within 20 to 25 years, 7 of the 13 had found ways to either abolish slavery or make ways for eventual emancipation.
Yeah.
And in 12 out of the 13, they had huge efforts to get rid of slavery altogether.
Right.
And Jefferson, along with Richard Bland, his uncle, tried to do it in Virginia. So these things, when you get it all together, you're looking. So the Declaration of Independence, when you really study the second paragraph of that, we used to call the American Creed or American Scripture, that is what our ideals are about. That is what we are all about. When you talk about our first national motto, which is still on the Great Seal, E pluribus unum, out of many one, out of many colonies one, but also we are one in our priorities and we're one in our vision and ideals and values. Now, do we all believe those values now? You know,
What I really appreciate about what you're saying is the other piece of this, which is, which Thomas Jefferson said so well, that we have rights that do not come from government; they come from God.
exactly.
And yet there's this struggle within his own words and his own writings about what would God's judgment look like if we don't solve
we
this
don't
major,
live up to this.
We don't live up to this. If we don't solve this major issue that is endemic in our society, endemic in the world at that time.
But look at
It's always nice to look back in the 1619, lens.
But that's not America.
No, it's not.
As John Adams said,
It's
America
insane.
was formed from 1760 to 1775.
Yeah.
That's when we got our priorities straight, and that's where we adopted our values, right? And so Thomas Jefferson, with these values, look, it's the first time in the history of the world that a nation said that we have unalienable rights and they're from God.
Yeah.
Okay, the freest nation in the world at that time was England. They didn't believe that.
No.
Okay, their sovereignty came from Parliament. Okay, first time
From
in
the
history
from the king, who got it from
Exactly.
God.
Right, but Parliament said to the colonies, "We're sovereign over you in all cases whatsoever." So it's not, and the reason for their government was to perpetuate the regime.
Yeah.
If you look in the Declaration, we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. First time in the history of the world. Endowed by certain unalienable rights. First time in the history where to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So if you go out and ask the common person on the street, what is the proper role of government? Nobody knows that. It's to secure our rights. So it's right there in the Declaration.
Right.
We used to all believe that. It is not to take care of you.
Yeah.
Keeping you safe is a purpose, but it's secondary to protecting our unalienable rights.
Right.
Deriving their just powers by the consent of the governed. Okay, so they get their power from us. That's where they get it. So just to teach these truths again, it's really important to do. And that established, so Patrick Henry finalized our priorities. The Declaration of Independence established our vision, our creed, our why, our purpose. Okay, what we want to eventually become. So those of you who think he was a hypocrite, in the 1820s he wrote, "Look, guys, I've gotten a lot of criticism about this and slavery and all this kind of stuff. You take it to the next level. Do you want to know where we were before we came around?"
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, you want us to become perfect overnight. And he's getting frustrated with this.
And that's the thing that I point to when you see all these protests against Jefferson and Washington and trying to rename schools and take down statues. It's like he specifically said, in order to form a more perfect union, it wasn't that it was formed; it was the goal.
That's
and he reiterated that throughout his life until his death, that we have to work towards that goal. No one said when we would be there. And guess what? We're not there yet.
Yeah.
But we have to keep
That's
talking
right,
about
but
it.
none of us. Nations act like people.
Right.
And I have beliefs, and I know you guys have beliefs, but here's the standard. Am I there yet? No. There's reasons to criticize. We can all call each other hypocrites, but it's when we stop trying. And America has lost our way when we lose those common values, as we did prior to the Civil War. Because false narratives taught 2 generations of Southerners that either Jefferson was wrong or he only meant white people. And those were the false narratives that started being perpetuated, and it's why they believed it, and this is how things start.
Yeah.
And so if we're not educated, we start making these wrong things. So one of the things that makes a team great, priority of principles. The other thing is understanding your why and your purpose and your vision and ideals, your vision, your priorities. And the third major thing is the structure. And that's why we have the Constitution.
Yeah.
So you can, and I'll equate this real quick to Pittsburgh Steelers if I can. So the Constitution is the structure. Madison said, no Constitution, no United States of America. So we had our vision and why and purpose, and we had our priorities, but nothing to govern ourselves.
Yeah.
And this is why Lincoln said the relationship between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, okay, is like an apple of gold surrounded by a frame of silver. And the latter is for the former, not the former for the latter. So what he meant was the Constitution is the protecting barrier. It's the walls that protects our vision and our why contained in the Declaration. And all the political decisions he made is based on the Declaration of Independence. Right. And if there's breaches in that wall and we do not conform to what we've agreed to, then there's danger to what the true meat and what we hold precious is. And so those are three things. So if we compare it to the Pittsburgh Steelers quick, look, you got a vision because they want to win the Super Bowl, right? If you don't have that vision, you're lost, okay? They have their priorities because when you are on the highest level SEAL team or an NFL team like that, even if you're married, got kids, what comes first?
Yeah.
The mission.
The mission.
Yeah.
You got your priorities, but you also have your structure. And you have to have those three things. And then you've got to have the right people in the right places. Why Washington was indispensable. You need your quarterbacks. You need all these different players, right? And you need to be able to execute. And guess what America did at its founding? We had all five of those. And Washington said, if we can keep this for one generation, we'll become the wealthiest nation on earth.
Yeah.
And we kept it for about then. So I've gone on enough, but I wanted to get that in.
I mean,
No.
but what you
It's always
point
great
out-
having you on because we not only get to see your passion about this, but also get a little history lesson.
Well, not only, but what you point out, those five things were impossible, but for the grace of God.
Yes.
I
I
that,
do not disagree.
That could not have
That's
happened.
right.
I mean,
The
Washington
the
alone,
odds are insurmountable.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the fact that it was Patrick Henry in Virginia. All of the pieces. There's so many ways that this could have just fallen apart.
Yes, you're right.
And it didn't, which is literally
It's miraculous.
proof
It's
that
miraculous.
God was involved.
His
right?
hand was involved.
Yeah.
I believe that wholeheartedly. I do. I don't think we would have made it this long, and I don't think we would have the documents that we have. And for those who think that the Constitution or Declaration are slave documents, you need to really read Madison and what he said about the Constitution, that they did not want to give sanction to property and man, that there were subcommittees that recognized it was wrong, but they wanted to form a union and had to acquiesce it. But everybody there knew slavery was on the downslide.
Yeah.
If you read the life of Frederick Douglass, who's just a wonderful example, a freed slave.
Great example.
And if you read, and I'd recommend your listeners to read his July 5th, 1852 speech, where he railed on America, okay? But he starts off by praising the founders, but then he railed on America by not living up to its ideals. But then at the end, he's like, he has faith because he knows the truth's going to get out, and that the Constitution and the Declaration were not slave documents, and that eventually this is going to touch the hearts and minds of people, not just in the United States, but everywhere. 1852, we still had hardcore slavery, and he was optimistic. You have many people reading that speech saying, see, he hated America. He didn't want, no,
Right.
no.
It's just the opposite.
He came in, it was like Christ, coming in and spanking the Pharisees, saying
Right.
you're not living up to what you should be doing. And you're speaking what I want you to hear, but your hearts are far away.
Right.
And I do think he was, a very religious man. I think he kind of taught like Jesus did.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, great point. Great point.
Jeff, always a tour de force
Yeah.
having you here. We love it.
No,
Well, I
grateful
mean,
to be here.
but also we're entering our fourth anniversary as a podcast, and you're one of our
Have
first
you guys
guests.
been? Yeah, that's so great.
and
man.
our founding pillars of faith, freedom, and free enterprise, the founding principles of our fair country, and it's always good to be reminded of the struggle to make those ideals a reality.
Absolutely, and it
is a struggle, and the
it is a
people who
struggle, yeah.
and the people who make light of it or think that we were founded on as a slave nation, they don't. They're just historically and they're just ignorant. They
Yes.
refuse to actually do the work, and they're actually about something much more sinister.
Well, it's either ignorant or it's nefarious.
Yeah, well, that's
mean,
what I
they're
mean.
trying
I
to
mean,
undermine-
they're really about something much more sinister,
But the
and that's
longer the
unfortunate.
nefariousness goes on, then the less people really know, and they don't know they're being snowed.
Right.
You know, and it's one reason why I really am pushing for mandatory American team building in the military or constitutional oath of office training. Because when somebody puts on that uniform, or a police uniform, or even firefighter, or all of us as citizens, when we think about being an American, it is not just another uniform. It represents those higher ideals, which I don't think you can do better. In other words, I think they're eternal ideals.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a next generation of ideas that are better than, you know, we believe, you know, we hold these things to be sacred, you know. So I don't think there is one-upping Jefferson. We hold these truths to be self-evident, right? These are eternal truths that we need to get out there. So when you put on that uniform, or you pledge allegiance, or you stand for the flag, in effect, yes, you're standing for all those that fought for that, but why did they fight for it?
Right.
What is the higher purpose that you're defending? And so with 10 years of DEI training, which is the antithesis of the American ideal, and we're probably running close on time, but at some point,
All right.
DEI, do we have time to go over any
Sure.
of that?
Still.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, look, the DEI mandatory training has dug a hole, and a lot of people have been fooled by that false narrative.
Sure.
But think about what the left and those false narrative preachers mean by when they say strengthen diversity. So what do they mean by that?
You're asking? I mean,
well, I can answer too.
Yeah,
but what do
I
you
mean,
think they're at?
they're-
I
they're-
mean, when they say strengthen diversity, diversity of what?
Well, I think that they view it as diversity of both race and opinion, I guess. I mean,
Well, race, sexual preference, sexual gender identity, you know, just all up and down, and possibly opinion. But is there really strength? Maybe in opinion there's strength in diversity of opinion. But I would say there's only strength in diversity of informed opinion,
Right.
Sure.
well-educated opinion, you know. But in reality, you know, we learn from, again, Pittsburgh Steelers, or pick your favorite team, there's strength and diversity of talent, right? And informed decision. Not everybody can be a quarterback. We need the running back. We need the guards and the fullbacks and everything else, the wide receivers. And we need these different talents. So, you know, I ask people.
the diversity that they're speaking of is not of achievement.
Right. And it's a diverse, and it's also
it's a checkbox.
multiculturalism and diversities of vision. And this is why there's no strength in diversity of vision.
Yeah.
And so right now, the problem and the reason we're so split is we have two parties that have separate visions. And we learned from the founding fathers that you can compromise if you have a similar vision. So if you and I want to drive to Virginia, Chris, and you want to go the southern route and me the northern route, we can compromise. But if you want to go to Miami and I want to go to Maine, there's going to be a struggle over the wheel.
Yeah.
right.
And so we need to have the e pluribus unum, one in vision, one in purpose, and we don't have that. So the way they teach diversity is wrong, and it's un-American.
Right.
Okay, where's the MLK vision of being judged by the content of your character? All of a sudden, that's out the window.
Yeah, it's completely reversed.
Yeah.
I mean, they turn it on its head.
Equity, of course.
You're right.
Equity is just a Marxist.
You know, the founders
Construct.
said you can't have equal outcomes without coercion.
Yep.
Right.
And you can't have a free society with coercion. So that's Marxist.
Yep.
It's completely, so how can you raise your hand to support and defend the Constitution and say you're for equity?
Yeah.
You can't be a communist. Sorry, guys. You cannot be a communist and raise your arm to the square to support and defend the Constitution.
Right.
You cannot do it. You can do it, but you're lying.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right.
You're lying. And then inclusion, none of these sports teams include just because you want to be included, right? Yeah. You can't be on the SEAL teams or an F-16 or 22 pilot or a podcaster just because you want to be included, right? Inclusion by merit, or at least inclusion by vision or values.
Yeah.
That we want to. So why are we bringing in a lot of people that don't share our vision and values? that hate America, that tear down. So these things that we're talking about today could guide our future and help us make decisions a lot better than we're doing if we can be better informed.
Yeah.
So thanks for letting me get that little bit in.
Well,
because
listen, it's a huge initiative, and like you said, we've had 10 years of, I would say, the darkening of the military in many respects. You have many patriots who are trying to hold on, and now hopefully we're in a new era where the people who do not love America, who believe in DEI and other things that are the antithesis of our Constitution,
right,
will not be in the military anymore.
Right. Well, that's
will not
why
be allowed to
recruitment
serve.
was down, because people didn't trust the current administration, or people are taught also to hate America.
But
so why would you risk your life?
You made another sort of allusion, and that was to the idea of American exceptionalism, and under, I would argue, under Obama, under Biden, that was a bad term. And
right,
and,
because why
and
are we
I think
so special?
I think for Americans believe they are exceptional. They believe they are the greatest country in the world, and they don't be told that they're not.
Well, I'd say about half of Americans believe.
I think
Well,
the
I think
vast
it might be
majority
more, though,
do.
because
maybe more than
I think the
half.
vast majority do.
I'll
Okay.
point to something that was a shift
Okay.
from this. Clearly, Obama tried to minimize the exceptionalism of America. Biden did so to a degree. What was very interesting is if you watched the Democrat National Convention this last year, there was a lot of talk about how great America was, about exceptionalism, and it was framed in the concept of democracy. That's fine. But I have not seen a Democrat National Convention in my lifetime that had as much patriotism discussed as they did, as much flag waving.
There was a lot of flags.
Because
yes,
because I think they recognized that there had been a shift, that the people were
good.
rejecting
I'm
them.
glad you saw that.
And
yeah.
so I think that whether they believed it or not, I don't know. But we'll see. I mean, some of them do. John Fetterman certainly does, senator from Pennsylvania.
Sure, yeah. He's been a surprise, huh?
But yeah, shocking. But you look at what happened at the State of the Union address. Clearly, there's a whole bunch of Democrats who don't believe it.
No,
because they sat on their hands at the times that should absolutely be national.
when we're actually celebrating the exceptionalism of America.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I think that there's still a disconnect between a core of the lefty Democrat leadership and America.
Yes.
And I think that separation is only going to hurt Democrats for I don't know how long. It could be that they're on the way out. I don't know. If they don't fix it, I don't see how they come back. And so that is the hope that I have. I mean, I think
hope
what you're
you're
saying,
right, Sean.
I think
I
what
do.
you're saying is important. We want to amplify it. That's why we have you here. But I do think that there has been a turn. There's been an inflection point where people say, "Wait a minute, we are a great nation."
Yeah.
And we're going to prove it now.
Yeah. I think you're right.
I hope you are, and I hope
Because the
that
pendulum swinging back to Trump in the
will,
way that it did
it
was
is.
dramatic. Nobody ever thought that would happen given everything that was thrown at him and then what happened during the election. And even the response that you saw from the speech the other night. It's been dramatic. And I think, to your point, Sean, I think the Democrats are in deep trouble.
Well,
if
I'd
they
like
don't
to ask-
embrace the idea
Yeah.
of American exceptionalism. It's really interesting that the Democratic response, accused Donald Trump, Senator, what's her name, Slotnick, of not believing in American exceptionalism. And it was the first time I heard a Democrat speak those words. Nobody believes her.
But I'd like to ask her what she thinks makes America exceptional.
Exactly.
I'd like to know.
Yeah,
So
that's a
that's
good
good to
question.
wave the flags, but what does it mean?
Yeah.
So why do you think we're exceptional?
It's
and what does it
because
mean
of
to
our
be an
declaration.
American?
It's absolutely because of our declaration.
That is
It's
that,
peace,
that's the
but
apple of gold,
but
as Lincoln would say.
Yeah, it really is. Wow.
Well,
just keep going.
Yeah,
Robin's
Jeff.
giving us the hook.
Yeah.
Jeff, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much,
for
Jeff.
being here.
Hey, thank you for having me. Appreciate it, guys.
We will have you back to continue to be educated.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and thanks to all you do for our country, and God bless the Navy SEALs and our fighting men and women. of
Keep
the
up
armed
the
forces.
good work, guys. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
God bless.
Thanks, everybody. See you.